So I'll invite you, as Thomas already has, to take a moment to really land with us here today. I invite you to close your eyes if you feel comfortable doing so, and to connect to your breath. You may also connect to your feet. Feel the ground beneath your feet. And imagine that you're breathing all the way through your feet into the ground, into the soil of this earth that nourishes us in so many ways. As you breathe in, sense the flowing of air in the forests of your lungs. Breathing in deeply, feel the flow of the rivers in your arteries, in your veins, in the lymph system. Breathing again deeply, sense the liveliness of the soils in your organs and tissues. Continue breathing, feeling the vibrancy of your microbiome, maybe digesting the nourishing lunch some of us have had recently. As you breathe, sense how your whole body is like a living cell of the broader earth system we are all a part of. And from that awareness of yourself as part of a greater, creative, generative living system, expand your sense of consciousness to the environment around you. You may visualize your favorite landscape. Visualize the soils, the diversity within the soils, their nutrients, the diverse networks of mycelium connecting all living organisms below the ground. Feel the nourishing power of the soils that is then shared with the plants, the roots, vegetables, other vegetables, bushes and trees that provide berries and fruits, or vast fields of cereals. You may open the door of your heart to sense the gratitude for the generosity and abundance of those landscapes that feed the animals, the birds, and of course ourselves. Feel the power of all the elements coming together. The flowing waters, the photosynthesis that magically transforms sunlight and nutrients into new forms. Let yourself be amazed by this complex web of life. Let yourself be nourished by its generosity. And sense the call from this web of life to all of us to take care, to put in our wisdom, individual and collective, to put in our workforce, to put in our hearts into taking care of the land. As we do so, let us do so with respect, humility, and a willingness to listen and learn from the wisdom that unfolds daily in this miracle of life. And let us take a moment to honor our coming together, that we may jointly be caretakers, transform food systems for the benefit of people and all non-human beings on this planet. Let us honor our ambition, our curiosity, and a desire to journey together. Take a few moments to breathe it all in. The liveliness in your body, your awareness of the connection between yourself and other life forms, and the connections between all of us here today. Let the gratitude and joy tenderly settle in your heart, in your body, in your mind. And you can slowly come back in your own pace with an open set of ears, open eyes, and an open heart. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Charlotte, for bringing us together. Wonderful to be able to start this this webinar with like this. Noemi, maybe we can have the presentation. Start sharing the slides. Thank you. Can move to the next one. So we are here today to, and very happy to do so, to share with you this report we have just launched called Cultivating Inner Capacities for Regenerative Food Systems, Rationale for Action report. So this is a report by the Conscious Food Systems Alliance we have been working on, putting together for the last 2 years. And it's a really, as you may notice, it's an unusual language for an organization like UNDP, who is a convener of this alliance. And that's why it is so important to really, define the concept, the new concepts we are working with in this alliance, such as inner capacities, for example. So we need to be able to explain and show the science behind this work and on the importance of cultivating inner capacities for regenerative food systems. So there is more and more, as you might see in this slide, there is more and more leaders that are calling for a change of mindset or a change of consciousness or a change of culture. Vandana Shiva here talks about a living food culture. So we think this work is very timely and has been wonderfully received by many of you. So we are really excited to bring, to explain, this vision of why do we want to work on the inner transformation for transforming food systems. So this report is now available on our website, including we have now also a Conscious Food Systems Alliance website that we'll present at the end of this presentation. So we can go to the next slide. It has been a collaborative endeavor. We have been really working, so many of us, so many of you have been contributing to this report. We have formed a CoFSA working group back in December last year, and we worked on it as part of this working group for 4 months. It was a very rich discussions, exchanges, and we have also had an important peer review during the spring. So it has been really a huge amount of work that so many of us invested in this report, and that makes it, very foundational, as I said. Can move to the, yeah. So we had different persons in charge of developing, coordinating the inputs of many people. And we have section leads, Charlotte, who offered this meditation on the section 1, Christine Wamsler, who will present today also the section that she has been leading, section 2, and myself, who led the drafting of the section 3 on the Conscious Food Systems Alliance. And we had a lot of courses, so 11 of them here, who have been very engaged in the Conscious Food Systems Alliance. So we are being very grateful for their inputs. Many of them are thought leaders working in the academia. So that was really, we think we were very lucky to have their contributions, and that makes this report so special. So this report is structured in 3 main sections. It starts with an executive summary, and we start with presenting the problem and why we need a complementary approach to food systems transformation, and a complementary approach that can address the inner barriers to transformation. Then in the second session, we show what kind of inner capacities are needed in the food systems, and how consciousness approaches can help cultivate them, and why this is so important to transform food systems. And finally, in the third section, we introduce our work in the Conscious Food Systems Alliance, presenting a potential agenda for actions, and also presenting some of the principles we have identified to work on this subject. And finally, we have done a lot of work on collecting case studies. So they are part of the annex, but it's also a separate report. And we have also have a complementary report, the theoretical foundations report, which was really the basis for this report, a basis a little bit more in academic terms that we simplify a little bit, translate more to food practitioners to make it more accessible, and also to embed it more in the context of food systems. And this theoretical foundation report was led by Christine Wamsler, who is with us today. So I will first present the section 1. I have to say, I forgot, but we will have, let's say, a half an hour presentation from now on, and then we'll have 40 minutes of questions and answers, so that we'll have a lot of times to hear your thoughts and reactions on what we present and what we are presenting today. So we think this is very timely, and that's what, as many of you have been able to witness in your work, in your organization. I think we are at a time when these ideas are more and more welcome and recognized. Also, because of the crisis we are facing, comes a recognition that there needs to be a more profound paradigmatic change in how we deal with issues such as transforming the food sector. We have this sentence opening this section from Gustav Spes, who were the former chair of the United Nations Development Group, who said, "I used to think that the top environmental problems were biodiversity loss, ecosystem collapse, and climate change. I thought with 30 years of good science, we could address those problems, but I was wrong. The top environmental problems are selfishness, greed, and apathy. And to deal with this, we need a spiritual and cultural transformation." So we are very inspired by these kind of leaders that have been able to, be courageous enough to name, how the limits of our current approaches and how we should start looking inside to make our work more efficient. Can move to the next slide. Thank you. So just to, as we are opening this presentation, and some of you not necessarily coming from the food sector, we just want to remind you how important or even critical are the food systems to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. We know food systems are broken somehow. There's a lot of problem associated with them, from hunger to environmental degradation to inequities, biodiversity loss, etc. So it seems really the food systems needs a very different approach, and they are more in an impasse right now. And they are critical. This problem is critical to address, because food systems transformation is the strongest lever to optimize human and planetary health and achieve the SDGs. So they are so important. And we know that more sustainable, equitable food systems are possible and necessary. But we see that despite significant investments and efforts towards transforming them, the solutions we are working with are not delivering the necessary impact, and we are running short of time. So there is a clear vision for regenerative food systems, and that have been presented in, for example, in the UN Food Systems Summit, showing that we could make these food systems work for people, planet, and prosperity. But as I say, the solutions, we are not able to turn this vision into reality. As we are positioning our work in the vision of regenerative food systems, I think it's helpful to present what we mean. Regenerative food systems go beyond sustainability to actively restore, revitalize, and replenish the soil, the water, the flora, the fauna, livelihoods, cultures, and planetary health. So we see that the regenerative vision is very systemic, happening, and all these different aspects, cultural aspects, environmental aspects, soil, etc., are all related and need to move to a different paradigm, one that is regenerative. And that means also working in alignment with living systems, working in partnership with life, and in harmony with how nature works. So why is this? Why don't we have the transformation that we should be able to make happen? We have often the technology, but we are not really we are not being able to bring forward this transformation. And we think this is because there are some inner barriers that we need to address. Of course, there are structural inequities. Of course, the people most affected are often the ones that have less agencies. But we think there is also, we need to look into what is happening in the human mind and heart. And we see that the extractive mindsets which is very shaping the dominant extractive paradigm of unfettered economic growth, is at the root of the problem and is connected to a cultural narrative of separation, in which especially in this these narratives comes from the West and modernity, let's say, and emphasize our disconnection with each other and our disconnection with nature. And by doing so, it also prompts a disconnection to ourselves, to reality. What we see also as an inner barrier is reductionism and siloed thinking, which inhibits our capacity to approach complex challenges in a systemic manner. We see also a lack of collaborative capacities, and simply a care deficit, like a lack of willingness to attend the difficulties and how these are affecting many of us in this planet. So we talk these patterns of disconnection from self, others, our natures are emphasized in this report. We have a specific box on that. So how do they show up in the food system? Well, we see, for example, that in many cases, or poor diets, for example, are not optimal for many of us, and we could make different behaviors, and sometimes they come from mental health issues. There is a strong link between mental health and the kind of diets we can develop. There is also, when we see a lot of people trying to bring change in these sectors, face issues of stresses and burnouts, and that can be linked in partly to a disconnection from self. We see also a disconnection from others because of these global value chains. We see there's a lot of distance between farmers and the consumers, and between all actors on the value chain. And this favors marginalization and not really caring about one another throughout this value chain. We see a lack of communication and polarization between different groups, and an ability to find common ground or collaborate. And finally, it's clear that the industrial food systems are very disconnected from nature. They rather work against nature rather than with nature. And even as consumers, we often, it's a little bit abstract from where this food is coming and how it is connected to a specific land, etc. So there again, the disconnection from nature, we think, play an important role in the outcomes of food systems. I will pass it to Christine for the section 2.
Thank you, Thomas. I now have the pleasure to briefly present the second part of the CoFSA Rationale report, titled Unlocking Transformation Through Consciousness Approaches. So the second part of the report is largely based on the CoFSA Theoretical Foundations report, which was also the result of an extensive co-creational process, and my deepest gratitude goes to all of my co-authors who have made this process deeply joyful, connecting, and nourishing. And some of them are here today. It's great to see you again. So in line with this quote by Daniel Christian Wall, the second part of the Rationale report explains why creating sustainable regenerative systems requires not simply a technical, economic, ecological, or social shift. Instead, it has to go hand in hand with an underlying shift in the way we think about ourselves, our relationships with each other, and with life as a whole. So in fact, while current efforts to transform food systems to focus on external solutions and how to increase the extrinsic motivation of stakeholders, for instance, through economic incentives, regenerative systems also require the cultivation of certain inner capacities of stakeholders. And that means that new, more integrative approaches that link inner and outer dimensions of sustainability are urgently needed. This need has been highlighted also in this year's assessment reports of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, in both the report on climate change adaptation and the one on mitigation. To address the gaps in current approaches, new knowledge, theories, and frameworks have been developed in recent years that demonstrate that the importance of linking inner and outer transformation for sustainability and how to support related processes. So in simple terms, they show that systemic change and inner change processes are deeply interconnected, and that addressing inner capacities might have great potential for transforming systems. Many of the theories that show that systemic change and inner transformation are deeply interconnected are based on the so-called iceberg model, and you see it here in that slide. In simple terms, the iceberg model illustrates that what we can see, so the part of the iceberg that is visible above the surface of the water, are the events or crises that define our world today. However, much more, so around 90% or so of the iceberg is invisible to us. In human terms, what is hidden beneath the surface are the underlying patterns of behavior, systemic structures, and mindsets that ultimately create the events or crises that characterize our world today. Based on this model, we can see that the capacity to address and reflect on our inner lives and mindsets and potentially adopt new paradigms can be a powerful way to significantly influence sustainability outcomes. In scientific terms, we call this a deep leverage point for change. So tapping into this deep leverage point, what does it involve? It involves the cultivation or nourishment of inner capacities, which can enable a deepening or expansion of individual and collective consciousness. It leads to an increasing circle of identity, care, and responsibility, and ultimately can support regenerative food systems. So, if we talk about inner capacities within the context of CoFSA, we refer to our individual and collective awareness, mindsets, beliefs, values, worldviews, and associated inner qualities and skills that influence the way we see and relate to ourselves, others, and nature. This relationship, so the relationship to ourselves, others, and nature, is crucial because we know today that sustainability challenges such as climate change or food insecurity are in fact internal human crises. They are the result, and Thomas mentioned that already before, just want to repeat and highlight that again, that they are the result of modern society's story or narrative of separation or disconnection, which assumes that our mind is separate from our feelings and emotions, that we are all separate from each other, that some humans are superior to others, and that we are separate and superior to the rest of the natural world. So treating the environment as a resource for the benefit of humankind and as an end for our economy has led to its abuse and destruction. In turn, this also means that then consciousness connection or reconnection with self, others, and nature can serve as a foundation for regenerative food systems. And such a relational paradigm is also foundational to many wisdom-based traditions. In recent decades, various competency of frameworks have emerged to support sustainable development. However, it is only very recently that they have also recognized the importance of inner capacities. And one example of such a framework are the inner development goals, the IDGs. It is a communication and outreach tool that has been very successful in making the field of inner development and inner transformation more accessible to a wide audience, particularly the private sector. The draft framework, which is presented here, includes 23 IDGs, such as self-awareness, perspective-taking, compassion, and courage. In scientific terms, we would call these transformative qualities and skills. And the so-called inner-outer transformation model that we present in our report is a framework that defines and describes such qualities and skills from a research perspective, how they are linked to collective and systems change, and how they can be addressed in an integrative way. On the basis of this inner-outer transformation model and also other emergent science and theory on inner-outer transformation, consciousness approaches can be understood then as approaches that integrate the consideration and cultivation of inner capacities into external interventions. And they aim to leverage certain consciousness practices that actively support the cultivation of inner capacities. Based on our review of current scientific knowledge and evidence, which we have conducted during this co-creative process, we identified 4 overlapping types of relevant practices in our report, and they are listed here on the slide. So, contemplative practices are often rooted in a variety of Western traditions, with mindfulness being one example. Then there are so-called psychological and cognitive behavior-based practices that have emerged from the social, psychological, and cognitive sciences. And they include, for instance, practices such as the acceptance and commitment therapy and diverse tools from adult development theory. In addition, there are transformative communication and facilitation practices that can help to support an enabling environment for change, for instance, through employing nonviolent communication and circles. And finally, there are transformative educational and leadership approaches that apply and adapt different practices and then combine them with complexity systems or design thinking. Emergent science and theory on inner-outer transformation also shows that consciousness approaches can and should be integrated into interventions across 3 interconnected levels: the individual, the collective, and the system level. At individual level, it is about measures that can help people to tap into their potential to support change, for instance, through education, training, and coaching. Measures at the collective or group level aim to support related learning environments, for instance, in the form of transformative multi-stakeholder spaces and networks. And finally, measures at the system level aim to support policy integration to systematically mainstream the consideration of inner capacities into existing institutional and political systems. So, for instance, through the modification of organizational policies and regulations, resource allocation, monitoring, and evaluation. Ultimately, our analysis and systematization that we have conducted through this co-creative process, looking into emergent knowledge theories and concepts of inner transformation, led to the CoFSA model of transformation that is illustrated here. And in short, what it shows is that it shows that consciousness approaches and the associated measures at individual, group, and institution levels can support the cultivation of inner capacities through nourishing transformative qualities and skills and the reconnection to self, others, and nature that are crucial for creating more regenerative food systems. And yes, on this note, I will now hand over to Alice.
Thank you very much, Christine. I have not yet introduced you. I forgot to introduce you. Sorry about that, Christine, but we have to say that we are very grateful for you to have been collaborating with us on this report, because Christine is a professor in sustainability at Lund University in Sweden, and she's really leading, pioneering this field of work. Her work is quoted in the last IPCC report, which emphasize, as she said, the role of inner transformation to address climate change. And she's also collaborating with the Inner Development Goals, who are also one of our partners in the Conscious Food Systems Alliance. So thank you so much, Christine, and we pass it to Alice.
Thank you, Thomas, and thank you so much, Christine, for that presentation. So I will now present the third section of the Rationale report, which introduces the Conscious Food Systems Alliance, its agenda for action, for applying consciousness approaches into food systems, and a set of key principles for cultivating inner capacities. So as you can see, the Conscious Food Systems Alliance, or CoFSA, convened by UNDP, is a movement of food, agriculture, and consciousness practitioners united around a common goal, which is to support people from across food and agricultural systems to cultivate the inner capacities that activate systemic change and regeneration. So the Alliance, or if we could just go on mute. Okay. The Alliance aims to establish the cultivation of inner capacities as a key evidence-based approach to create regenerative food systems. And, through this work, we want to really, help to build the legitimacy for this agenda. So how can we do that? Well, firstly, through convening this community of practice and learning. So we aim to, bring together an intentional community of peers where both individuals and organizations can connect, learn, and exchange knowledge, support and inspire each other, and ultimately collaborate to build conscious food systems. And hand in hand with this, we are, through this community, we are pioneering the application of consciousness approaches and practices into food systems. So we can do this through building a global portfolio of interventions, which includes the delivery of consciousness trainings, coaching, facilitation services, and all of this supported by research and learning frameworks. So CoFSA takes a whole systems approach to transform food and agriculture. So this means we work with governments, companies, farmers, local communities, development practitioners, and so on, to develop conscious interventions and activate, the change and transformation that we want to see in food systems. So doing this, we focus on three core areas, which you can see on this slide. So those are looking at supply chain transformation, food systems policy and pathways, and transforming sustainable landscapes. So I'm now going to go into some more detail on what we mean by each of these areas. So we'll start with sustainable landscapes. So firstly, we have conscious farming and local community development. So what we want to do in CoFSA is work with farmers and local communities to improve livelihoods, to improve forest conservation, biodiversity, and water resource conservation, and protect and improve soil health and so on. And what can CoFSA do towards those aims? So some of the approaches we can take in this area are around the cultivation of particular mindsets and values which are known to support the adoption of regenerative agricultural practices. And this can be fostered through a host of approaches, as Christine mentioned, such as fostering greater connection to the land, fostering a stronger sense of responsibility and solidarity between stakeholders, and really just working with the intrinsic motivation of stakeholders, as well as the extrinsic motivation, which many current solutions focus on. We want to support the resilience, well-being, and overall empowerment of farmers and local communities through trainings, peer circles, and even working with trauma healing approaches. And we want to support more human-centered project design and implementation. So making sure that project design really takes into account and understanding inner capacities, such as people's motivations, cultural considerations and attitudes, which are so often overlooked in current solutions. So I'll now move on to our next area, which is revitalizing and strengthening traditional wisdom. And here again, we want to work with local communities and also in particular Indigenous peoples to support intergenerational learning of food and land-related traditional knowledge, which could be, for example, through participatory media training and locally designed curriculums. And we want to revitalize traditional cultural practices for conscious dialogues and conflict solving. Next slide, please. So next we can look at food systems policy and pathways. So I'll start with food policy reform. So in this area, CoFSA works with government officials and policymakers to both improve the quality of interaction of policymakers, to foster sort of stronger listening skills and reduce polarization in those spaces, and also to support the design and passing of policies and laws that integrate a more compassionate approach to humans and nature, based really on human dignity and deep sort of respect and reverence for the more than human world. And we can do this through working to transform civil service and political cultures, for example, through trainings in compassion or nature connection or mindfulness, as well as shifting the framing and decision-making on complex problems that policymakers are dealing with, and supporting the design of policy processes to enable that. And then looking at multi-stakeholder dialogues. So in this area, we work to create safe, connecting and transformative spaces. And we do that by working to equip stakeholders with skills and practices, for example, to overcome communication challenges and deal effectively with conflict in multi-stakeholder dialogues. And also, to facilitate these spaces, to support, building trust between stakeholders, building empathy, listening, and really reducing the kind of conflict and polarization that can often develop in those contexts. So we'll then move on to the last area, which is supply chain transformation. So looking at the cultural transformation of organizations, here we can work with companies, global NGOs, development agencies, looking to really transform supply chains to sort of support the transition to regenerative food systems. And we approach this by focusing on fostering conscious leadership, through trainings, coaching, awareness-based learning journeys, for example, even team building retreats, and really supporting the development of more conscious procurement processes, which, respect humans and the more than human world. And this could be through deep dialogue processes or immersion experiences, for example, with local communities who are in the supply chain and affected by this. So lastly, working with consumers or eaters, as we prefer to say, on conscious consumption to support the adoption of more healthy, sustainable and local diets. And this can be, for example, through education programs around traditional food cultures, and healthy and sustainable diets, and also, really working with behavioral change insights, and also mindful eating practices, for instance. And I will just say, on all of those areas I've just presented, there's a lot more information in the report to unpack all of this. So I'll now just go through the CoFSA principles for cultivating inner capacities. And these are principles that we see as really important when working in this area. And these have been co-created through a series of workshops and engagements with CoFSA partners over this year and last year. So the first one is around context specificity. And this is about how, whether you're working at the global, national, or local levels, CoFSA interventions must be tailored to specific challenges at hand and the needs and wants of change agents. This isn't about rolling out, one-size-fits-all solutions. We know that everyone is on their own path of growth and evolution, and all interventions and approaches, must respect that. So CoFSA is here to kind of offer a space and tools to support greater individual and collective awareness and flourishing, but not here to treat anyone as sort of objects to be changed. So that's really important. The importance here is also on, as I said before, creating safe, connecting, and transformative spaces and conditions for systemic change. So within that, we have an emphasis on this must include explorations of power and bias. Otherwise, we know that these approaches may not lead to the deeper mindset shifts that are needed, and to avoid sort of dominance of one group's values or perspectives over another. Next is an emphasis on, all interventions must be locally relevant in terms of language, techniques, frameworks, religions and philosophies, and many other cultural considerations. And they should always harness local resources as far as possible. And traditional wisdom is crucial to enacting this principle. So we also seek to work with, a real variety of practices and approaches. And in Christine's presentation, you will have seen we mentioned quite a number, but there's a huge diversity of practices that can be harnessed to support the cultivation of inner capacities, and these should always be adapted and used as relevant and appropriate in cultural contexts. So CoFSA also acknowledges kind of both the spiritual origin of many of these practices, and the role that faith-based and religious organizations have in supporting these approaches and the development of inner capacities is very welcome, as well as recognizing the opportunity to promote secular practices in many other contexts, where as and when it is appropriate. Our final principle emphasizes that in CoFSA, all these approaches are informed by both a sort of Western idea of evidence-based, so in terms of Western science, but also, very importantly, by the lived experience, knowledge, and wisdom of practitioners in food systems, and particularly of local and indigenous communities who are recognized as wisdom keepers, as protectors of land and biodiversity, and who really offer a critical contribution through indigenous and traditional ways of knowing and being and maintaining harmonious local food systems. And then finally, the report contains an annex, as Thomas mentioned, which provides links to a full set of case studies. And these present the work of many of our brilliant partners in CoFSA in different contexts. So from mindfulness training with politicians in the EU and the UK, to cultivating farmer well-being in India, to reviving the consumption of traditional foods in Brazil. Those are just a few examples. So I'd really encourage you to go into those. and also the theoretical foundations report, which this document, builds on heavily and has a lot more detail on the theoretical underpinnings of this approach, which Christine is the lead author of. And lastly, just to note that we do have an executive summary of the full report, which is just 2 pages long, and is available in English, Spanish, and French, and you can download these from the website. So thank you so much, and I'll now pass over to Thomas to open for questions and discussion.
Thank you very much, Alice. Alice is the coordinator within the Conscious Food Systems Alliance within the Secretariat team in UNDP, and she has been playing this important role of coordination, bringing together all the different contributions in this report. So we still have, it was a little bit longer. There's a lot of materials to unpack, as you will see in this report. We invite you to look at the report in our website. We still have 25 minutes for some reactions, questions from you. So I'd like to open the floor to that. Feel free to unmute yourself, or maybe put your hands on the screen, or put a question in the chat. I think I've seen maybe Wendy unmuting herself. Do you have a question, Wendy?
I will say a question now, because I did unmute I really just wanted to congratulate everyone involved. I'm involved in loads of conversations globally. I actually think this is a hugely important area, but I really appreciate the depth of the focus and attention to this. I think it's beautifully written. And as I was going through the slides, I was thinking, I'm going to come back to you. I could see the same principles being used outside of the food systems. We could use a lot of the things that you've developed and just put them into other systems. So yeah, it was really just to congratulate everybody. I think it's beautifully written and thoughtfully written to encompass a number of absolutely crucial areas. And the same topics and what's lovely is the same conversations are happening everywhere. But I think you've produced something that's going to be a fantastic contribution to what's going on at the moment. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Wendy, and thank you to everyone. No, that's really an alliance work, and we are diversity and the richness of alliance members who participated in drafting this report is really amazing. So we are really, and we think this model indeed of a sectoral alliance focusing on this conscious approach, I think is probably is a pioneering model, and we hope to see that emerging in different sectors.
Could I say something, Thomas?
Please, Christine.
I think what Wendy said is actually crucially important, and there are two things. One is, in a way, what Wendy was saying, that the principles that we present are equally relevant for all kinds of sectors, and this is the case. In a way, when we were starting the process, actually, we were looking into just what does science tell us, and then we were applying it to the food sector. So, and that's why naturally it's possible to apply the work that we did together to all kinds of sectors. And in a way, we also argue in both reports that that is needed, because once we understand that actually the sustainability crises are human internal crisis, we also see that we cannot in any way treat them in isolation. So actually, if we then want to work on food, we have to work on climate change and poverty and all the other crises in coordination, and they share the same roots, so to say. So it's very important. Thanks, Wendy, for bringing that up.
Any other question or reaction? We have also so many people who are here who have been involved in the drafting. There have been a lot of also conversations happening, on how do we negotiate some trade-offs, or where do we put emphasis, how do we choose to define consciousness, etc. So we know there's a richness of exchange and perspective. So I'm happy also to give the voice to some of you that have been involved in these discussions. Charlotte.
Thank you, Thomas. I actually have a question for the group. I mean, I have the pleasure now to be joining the team part-time as one of the consultants and really looking at how we apply this concretely on the ground. And so we have a few collaborations with a couple of UNDP country teams at the moment in Latin America. But I think it's really the challenge for all of us is going to be, okay, how does it work in practice? And how do you measure it? You know, it's not because you give somebody a mindfulness training that all of a sudden their behavior gets transformed overnight. So it's often these consciousness issues are part of a long personal journey that each one takes up in their own individual way. There's the issue of cultural sensitivity. One of the conversations we're having in the team is, how do we avoid being top down with this? You know, we don't want to be coming in with a set of trainings on consciousness-based practices in cultures which have completely different referentials and a lot that we can learn from. So we're going in there with a lot of humility and desire to learn and listen and being very cautious, because some things, as you know, as Christine was saying, they're not visible. So do we really understand them? So I'd just love to have, you know, maybe some of you sharing if you have some experiences of this kind of work happening on the ground, or also, do you feel it's easy to bring this up in your institutions? I hear we have a great diversity of colleagues from NGOs to UN organizations, researchers. If we go to FAO, will this be like, oh my gosh, these are completely new age concepts? Or on the contrary, are people in these policy forums willing and thirsty and interested? So I'd just love to get, you know, a bit of your sense of how this can all land where you're working at the moment.
Thanks, Charlotte.
Hi, everyone. I have a comment. I'm very grateful to be part of this group. Can you hear me?
Yes, we do.
Oh, okay, great. And thank you, Thomas, for inviting me to be part of CoFSA. I think it's amazing. I've been guided through my life to embrace mindfulness, and I'm in the agriculture space and agriculture innovation. And so I'm on the ground, so to speak. So I really see that food systems can be transformed from the ground up and from the local community up. And obviously, yes, speaking to the culture of each local community and so on. I think that one thing that we do, because of the systems we use are regenerative, they have an indigenous flavor, I would say, from my background. And what we find is when we're working as a community within the systems that we use spirals to grow food. And when people come and they're volunteering their time to harvest the food to help the people in the community as we give all the food away from our projects, there is such an amazing connection with people and the growing of food and the sharing of food. And I believe that in time, I will be able to help the group from a perspective of somebody in a community on the ground, working with people to help them see beyond the confines of their mind today, you know, as the society has put them in a box, and this is how food systems work. But I believe that if we can shift them and shift their attitude, and we, you know, kind of speak to them in a way that they appreciate and accept, for instance, through conversations with them over a table full of fresh cooked food, or through memes on social media, speaking to people at the point where they are in their conscious development. So I'm looking forward to helping in any way I can.
Thank you, Siobhan. We're looking forward to have you engage in your work. I've also seen Joshua writing on the chat, and Joshua has been echoing the question of Charlotte. Joshua has been a very important member of CoFSA from the beginning. I'm wondering, Joshua, if you want to give a bit your perspective from your work at the grassroots level in Cameroon, that indeed we have documented as a case study, and that can give you a great example of how you approach that from an indigenous perspective.
Thank you, Thomas. I can share that I think UNDP has done a noble thing to actually connect all the, we will call them the 4 directions of indigenous knowledge in this work, either through research or actually working directly with the people on the ground. I can give my example as somebody who in 1996 created a space for young people in Cameroon called a Better World Cameroon, an NGO that was already looking into the future and trying to take young people out of the linear mindset of Western education to reconnect them with the land, because the education was just kind of uprooting them to look to the West. Yeah, so this is almost a miracle of one person's work that grew into the Global Eco-Village Network Africa. So I'm here highlighting the importance of innovative solutions like permaculture, eco-village design. Integrated design is exactly what they're talking about, the inner goals, and indigenous people know this very well. So I use a system that is called rite of passage, which is about holding youth circles, initiating them through a channel into adulthood. I think this is important in the work of CoFSA to highlight that. As we know, life grows slowly. I know digital is important, but also that there are stages where a baby has to make 9 months, and a baby needs midwives. Even as the baby starts to grow, the mother or the nursing has to balance the baby to be able to sit and hold the baby and direct the baby. So it is very important, this work of guidance, to build into the system some values. We call them connecting with the ancestors. This is why this practices happen in a spiritual forest. And maybe the concept is a spiritual forest. It's a virgin. It's a place where man has not treaded and intervened and corrupted and so on. So this is very important, that in that nature has a way of actually commanding respect of the humility we are talking about. So having been able to connect indigenous and the modern happening here, I think this is really an innovation of how regeneration should work. That in life, everything is interconnected. So science has a place, and indigenous knowledge has a place. I was always asking the question in the CoFSA discussions, whether Africa, which is a huge continent, actually has a space in this new ways of looking at sustainable development. Yeah, so this is what I can say. There is a lot more, but I don't want to take all the space. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Joshua. And indeed, through these discussions, we have been, while working on this report, we have been able to evolve our thinking and for example, recognize the plurality of sources that, we want to make this agenda evidence-based. So we will be, measuring, evaluating the interventions in CoFSA, but we also recognize that there is a lot of practices that have not necessarily been evidenced by science, but they are rooted in traditional wisdom, and they are also legitimate to bring in interventions. So thank you, Joshua.
We have a question from Barbara in the chat. I don't know, Barbara, if you'd like to unmute and read out your question. Otherwise, I can read it out for you.
Hello, I don't know if you can hear me well.
Yes, great.
Perfect. Thank you for the discussion. It's very fruitful and very, very interesting. I wonder whether the writers could explain a bit more about the role of the government. How do they see the government at local and national level? They can contribute to make it visible in countries and to bring coherence into their roles and responsibilities. And if you have thought about the possibility to work on certain integration of these dimensions into policies or regulations, how do you see these things? Just want to hear your feedback. Thank you so much.
I don't know if someone would like to answer.
I can start with some
Christine?
few words. I guess what was important for us, and that is reflected in the model that we presented, is that to make clear that if we want to focus, more on the consideration of inner capacities in external interventions, that does not only require capacity development, but it's actually a very complex interaction of different measures that have to take place at the individual, at the collective, and at the system level. And obviously, governments are absolutely crucial to support related measures. And so across all these three levels. And like I explained in the part that I presented, that it's obviously about really modifying the way we work. That means the way how our vision statements are written, the way how we communicate, the way how we use project management tools, how they are designed in current systems. They are designed in a way, our structures and cultures and systems are designed in a way that they do not build on our inner capacities, our inner potential. They are not built on universal values. And in a way, we have to modify them in a way that they are built on universal values and consider inner potential and inner capacities. So in a way, it means really a systematic adjustment and modification of how we approach sustainability, how we approach food systems, etc., etc. So yes, it requires a change in policy. It requires a change in regulation. It requires a change in resource allocation, etc., etc. So that's just a start of the conversation.
Thank you, Christina. I see Tom also has his hand raised, and I'm wondering maybe whether some of our friends from FAO also may like to react to that questions. Go ahead, Tom.
Sure, thank you. Can you hear me okay? You can, great. Yeah, I just wanted to build on Christine's response there. I think there is obviously a big role of capacity and kind of competency building in government around systems thinking, but also, and some of the other co-authors have been involved in kind of mindfulness approaches and training kind of policymakers in those different ways of being and thinking. So I think there's a big role of kind of capacity building in government to help kind of wise decision making and understanding the importance of sort of deeper consciousness change. But I also think, you know, we shouldn't underestimate the challenge we face. I mean, my own work has been with the UK government, and there's a lot of focus on economic and technological fixes to our problems. But the issue being that they're not really fixes, you know, they're superficial sticking plasters. But I think moving beyond that kind of techno-scientific approach of kind of manipulating these systems to actually a much more deeper recognition of the kind of importance of socio-cultural aspects, I think is still a battle to be won. And I think trying to highlight that, you know, it's not just about promoting this view and we have all the time in the world. I think there's a danger we're trapped in some quite serious vicious cycles around attitudes and values and environmental degradation. And there's a danger that things are getting worse as the environment degrades and the climate causes extreme events, that we get a shift to much more survivalist mentality and kind of shutting the borders, building kind of a sort of a survival mentality, which goes against some of these broader shifts in consciousness towards openness and sharing, etc. And I think, I don't want to talk for too long, but I do think there's a serious challenge, and we've yet to win that battle, with many policymakers thinking in a way that kind of, just inventing technofixes, precision farming or nanotechnology, etc., is going to solve the problem, but it patently won't.
Thank you, Tom. Definitely, you know, we are a complementary approach that can help make other approach more effective. Passing on to Daniel.
So first of all, congratulations on the launch of the report and all the work that has gone into it. This is very important work. And I want to speak from a perspective of leadership, especially in Africa. And our vision, I run a foundation, and our vision is transforming leadership as the key to an Africa that works for everyone. And mindfulness is very key to transforming leadership, because the type of leadership that exists at the moment, I think it was Tom who has just described how, you know, your focus on technology, your focus on economic transformation, and what we have found in our work, which might be a way of just bringing something that we can begin to think about, is working with the faith communities. So we have found that working with the faith communities, they're more receptive. They understand the conversation of mindfulness. It may be different from the way it shows up in different faiths. But in terms of the mindfulness, the faith community is much more open, and they can actually see that, especially in terms, I was involved in development work in agriculture for almost 20 years. They can see that lots of money has been poured into the agricultural sector, for example, and other sectors, but it has not really worked. So I think that as we think in terms of expanding this work into the African continent, we could use the traditional systems of going through government policymakers, the African Union and other organizations. But I think that what has happened, especially with COVID, is that there's a whole decentralization of policy making and thinking, new organizations coming up. And I think, you know, it might be interesting to see the possibility of going kind of different pathway to get this work rooted quickly and in a cost-effective way. The traditional system is very expensive because if you're going to do a big meeting with African leaders in Ethiopia or in Johannesburg, wherever, you know, it's lots of money, but very little traction, especially on the ground. So I think that we'll really have to rethink and see how would this work really land effectively on the continent. And I think organizations like what Joshua has spoken make a big difference. And they may look small, but there are many. And if one has that mindset, then you have the possibility of really beginning to have a shift in the game. So thank you for this work. I look forward to reading the report in details and seeing how we can work together with Thomas and the rest of the team. Thank you so much. Well done.
Thank you very much, Daniel. So we are looking forward also to engaging more with you. We have almost reached the end of our time before concluding, maybe Ruth and Barbara, if you can make it very short, because we still need a little bit of time for the conclusion. Thanks.
Yes, just very quickly, what comes for me strongly listening to the conversation is where we place our energy. I guess this is baggage for me, but I just need to say it, is I've spent 25 years of my life working with big companies, and there are brilliant people within them that really get what we're trying to achieve. But the company structures, somebody said today in a meeting I was in, she called them power pyramids. I'd never heard it made, talked about that way. But this is the thing, some of these organizations and structures are not set up to achieve what we're talking about. So I'm just raising it really because it's very easy to go to the big boys and the governments, I guess, as well. There's a lot of people on the ground and people doing things, which is very obvious in this group here. And yeah, it's just for us to think about where we place our attention, and our efforts. But it's a great work. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ruth. Barbara?
Yeah, thank you, Thomas. And yeah, actually building on what Ruth has just said, I'm working for the Scaling Up Nutrition Movement Civil Society Network. And we've had some consultation with our members, and we have like about 4,000 NGO members on the ground working in one way or the other, in the area of food. And we've really seen something change with the COVID-19 pandemic, and really some sort of more consciousness towards going back to local food systems, because especially also with the war in Ukraine, a lot of countries have just realized how important it is to go back to ensure their own food sovereignty. And so the focus has a little bit, there is, I can say that there is more emphasis on local food systems right now. And so I think this is really an opportunity to look at that, and yeah, building on what Ruth has said, maybe it will be easier to put the energy towards this localization of food systems and putting more emphasis on raising awareness and consciousness in this area, because it's easier to manage and it's closer to the people and closer to the ground and closer to the reconnection with nature and to the land, before thinking big picture and changing the whole system, which can be easily so overwhelming. But thank you. Looking forward to continuing being involved.
Thank you, Barbara. Likewise. So maybe just a final intervention with Karel before we move on to the conclusion.
Thank you very much. And I don't want to take too much of your time, but I've been sort of wondering, where do we go from here? I mean, the rationale, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful document. The language is convincing. But I always think about these things in terms of how do you get across actually, and I think it's very difficult to sort of transmit the rationale to other people, other organizations through a document. I think everybody has to develop, I think, their own rationale for a more conscious approach. And so I was struggling with the question, and that's why I put it in the chat box as well. How do we see CoFSA? Is it a program that does things? Is it like a facility that supports people? Or is it more of sort of an organic network? And to me, the answer is obvious. I think it has to be an organic, expanding network, and whereby we sort of engage with more and more people to think through this rationale for themselves and build it up for themselves, specific to their individual situation, their organization situation. And I think we could be like a mutual support network to make this happen. And so this is the question that I have maybe for you, Thomas, and the others in the core team. Like, what's the engagement strategy to make this happen? How do we help you? How do we help ourselves here as a group to move this agenda forward? Thanks for the opportunity to be part of this.
Thank you, Carol. We are very happy to have you with us. And yeah, that's a good transition to you know, what Noemi will present in a moment to conclude, because we are really coming more and more alive. It's an important moment with coming out of this release of these documents, many others, and starting a new plan of activities. But before Noemi presents us that, I'd like to take just 1 minute to just pause and just start to listen inside. You know, how do we feel after this call, after this presentation, being together for almost an hour and a half? I'd just like to a moment of silence just for everyone to reconnect. How does it feel? And maybe share in the chat, you know, in a few words as a way to how do you say, brief out? Sorry. Yeah, Noemi, just let's wait 30 seconds to give the space to everyone, and then you can conclude this meeting. Thank you. Thank you. Noemi, you want to share with us some information?
Yeah, I will briefly share a few information regarding the next steps of CoFSA. So we just launched the website last week. So if you would like to learn about CoFSA, our story and our co-creational journey, as well as our activities and achievements to this date, you can just visit the link in the chat that Alice is sharing. And also here you will find resources and information on how to join the movement, how to join the alliance, and contact points if you want to reach out to us. We are now moving into a more structured and formalized phase of the alliance, and we are opening the application to join. So as you can see, you can submit the application form, which is a simple Google form. and you can find it on our website under Join the Movement. And as well, Alice is posting the link in the chat. If you want to know more details about, membership benefits, commitments, and criteria, you can just read the membership agreement framework. And also this document is available on our website. The membership is selective just because we want to ensure a diverse and balanced composition. So we want to ensure that everyone is represented from food stakeholders, agriculture stakeholders, as well as consciousness practitioners. And we want to keep diversity in terms of geography, skills, so global, national, local stakeholders. The members can join the Alliance individually, so organizational endorsement is welcome, but it's not a requirement. And of course, engagement is on a voluntary basis, and members should contribute as much time and energy as served them. And there is no fee for participation to the Alliance. Also, another news is that we are launching our community in few weeks. We are, as you can see, a global community, which is supported by a collaborative digital platform. In the collaborative digital platform, you can connect with peers. You have the opportunity to participate to our gatherings, webinars, have coffee chats, and collaborate on specific issues because of dedicated action groups that we can create. Also, we are going to have monthly events as this one. So this was just the first of a long series of events. In order to join the platform, you need to be a member of the Alliance. So after submitting the application form. However, we are hosting monthly open events for the whole community. So we look forward to having you joining those events as well. And then finally, we are hosting an event at COP. So we have shared already information, but this event is very important. We will be on the 12th of November at 1 p.m. Egyptian time, and you need to register at the link that Alice will share in the chat as well. So thank you, everyone. I pass to Thomas.
Thank you very much, Noemi. So thank you, everyone, for staying with us throughout these calls, and we look forward to engaging more with you. It's really exciting to see this shaping up, and we will really have at least a monthly call to look deeply together into some of the most important issues for this agenda. So we look forward to engaging more with you. Have a great day. Thanks.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.